see. See if this works this time. Let me know if you can hear me. Oh, yay! Okay. So that was my fault. Surprise, surprise. I told it the wrong setting and it wouldn't let me change it once it was live, so I had to disconnect. Sorry. That was my issue. Oh, man. Rennie, Rachel, Kendra. Oh, I'm so glad you guys are here. I hate when I mess up like that. But, everybody's very forgiving. You're going to have to tell me if I'm way too loud with my coffee because I stir it all the time because it's a blended thing and I don't think about it and then it's like this. So, if it's doing that, okay, good. Mariella here and Jerry. Yay! Mm. Sorry. And Trey and Carolyn. Everybody's here. This is so cool. And I can see the comments now because I couldn't see the comments a minute ago either. Sorry, that's my dog. He's locked out, and my boys are about to come, like they're coming home, and he's hearing the car. And that's why he's barking. Because that's what he does. Oh, did I tell you guys? We are moving to Phoenix next year, and I have to get rid of my dog because. Get rid of, that sounds terrible. I have to rehome him because he's a large dog. He's already about 55 pounds and he's still growing. He's only a year old. And we are not going to have the space. We have a couple acres here, so we've got lots of room for him. And my husband runs and takes him with him, and I take him, and my parents are close, and we walk the dogs. And we're just not going to have all of that when we live in the city. So it's a little bit heartbreaking, and I've been very sad. Um, and of course, because it took months to make that decision. Of course, as soon as I was like, okay, I think we just have to do it. I think it's just better for him if we find him a home. Then, of course, he just spends the next 3 days just like in my lap. I didn't say anything to him. The good news is my husband works with a woman who has a 50-acre farm and she's a dog breeder. Did you guys just hear that bing? Did that come through um, the microphone? Hey, Kirsty's made it. Don't worry, Christy, I was late too because I had technical difficulties. This isn't late, by the way. 107 does not qualify as late at my events. I'm sorry, I was telling my story and not saying hi, Cervanthi, hi, and Trey, and Nora, you made it. This is so cool. I love doing this. I've missed doing this. You know, we have not done this since February. That has been that's been a loss in my life, a lacking. I'm very happy that we're here today. Oh, hi, Cindy. Yay. Okay. Well, I think we have enough people here. I'm sure there's more to come. But um, we also have a lot to get through. So I think we should probably just start. Um, just need to make my notes here, make sure I have all my stuff because I have a bunch of um, giveaway things and they're all down here. So you're going to see me like disappear from frame sometimes to grab them and show you guys. If this is your first event, if you haven't been here before, I think most of you have. Um, but the way this works is that I gathered questions from people in the last couple weeks since the book finished. And so that I could answer those questions. If you have questions on top of the questions, you're welcome to ask them in the comments. I won't always see them while it's happening. But usually if I get to the end of something, I'll be like, so is there anything else on that? And then I'll see it. So just keep posting your question until I see it or until somebody snaps their fingers in front of my face and I get it. But the thing you should know is if you have not read the book, even the questions will be spoilers today because we were talking about everything that's everything before, during, and after the story. There are no holds barred. So if you have not read the book, this is your last chance to walk out and not get it spoiled for you because it will be spoiled pretty much from very early on. Um, but also, as long as you're here, if you do need to leave, make a comment really quick before you go, because every comment today through the whole event is an entry I will do at the end. So there's giveaways during this event, but then at the end, anyone who showed up, and the only way I know you showed up is if you put a comment in there, goes into the draw for the hardback. See, I need to grab it already. One second. Um, if you're here today, this is the um, hardcover edition of the first volume, and you will also get one of these desk calendars that starts for um, January 2025. It's got a whole bunch of character aesthetics and stuff in it. Anyway, so the final prize today, which won't be drawn until after we're done, is those two things. So definitely get in and comment now. And if you have to leave because we go on for a long time, make sure and drop a comment. And basically anytime you comment, it's an entry, so you might as well talk it up. Tara, yes, I am moving. My husband's job is moving us to Phoenix, which we're actually pretty excited about, but it's pretty complicated too. So, yeah, it's not, there's just a lot going on. I'm just going to put this away so that I don't, sorry, you hear the rustling. That's because I got super organized because you guys always end up waiting 3 months for me to send the giveaways. Today, they're all pre-packaged. They're already in their mailers. So literally all I have to do is write the address on them. Oh, and that's the other thing. If you win a giveaway today, even if you've won one before, please be kind. Uh, Private message me your address in full. Even if you've given it to me 15 times before, because it's just faster and easier. And I will try and spend half an hour after this and just get everybody's addresses so that it's all done and you don't have to wait 3 months for these like you did with the other ones. Sorry, and the Christmas. I'm also almost prepared for Christmas. That's how far ahead I am. Um, anyway, I'm really glad you guys are here. The giveaways are going to be a little bit different this time. Some of them are just like that, where you just have to do something or comment or whatever and you get an entry. Some of them, there's one or two that I'm just giving to people who were really instrumental for me during this book. And then there's other ones that you'll get to sort of enter for while we're here. But just like I say, make sure that you comment. I think that's enough of an entry. Last chance. If you have not read the end of the book and you're watching this, turn it off, go away, do whatever, because we're going to get into it and it's going to come up pretty quick what happened at the end. Okay, so as usual, I've broken the questions into sort of um, two or three different. I'm just checking through. Love the cover. Yeah, I really love the hardback cover too. Um, I have broken the questions into two or three sections. So the first is I got several questions about the writing and about the story setup, like my either my process or questions for me. And I'm going to do those first, and then we are going to talk about the character and plot questions from the story itself, and then we're going to talk about the after the story questions because there was quite a few. Or actually, there was only a few, but they got asked a lot about things that happened after the story finishes in the uh, in the book. Jerry, I haven't given him away yet. He's still here, but I'm going to have to rehome him. But I'm praying because we have a friend who has a 50-acre farm and she may take him, and I'm praying that she will because that would be he would be in heaven there, honestly. So anyway, thank you for caring. It's ugh, I hate it. Anyway, so the first one that came up was that oh, and by the way, because a lot of the questions were repeated from like multiple people. So I didn't end up jotting down who asked which. So I apologize. I just kind of put them all together because they all kept getting asked over and over. One thing that kept coming up was that Kaz was a real departure for me. Like that this type of story, or at least Kaz's character, was very different for me. And a lot of people wanted to know what inspired that. And that was in a variety of different ways phrased, but that was the upshot of what everybody was asking. So, if you were here about this time last year, I was writing Heart of Fire, which, if you have not read, was the dragon fantasy book, the Dragon Rider fantasy book that I wrote last year on My Fave Reads, and it won the romance competition for the year. I started that in April or May. I started publishing it in June. And so we got to about August of last year, and I knew that I needed to be doing a second book alongside that one. And I was in the place in the story of, for those of you who've read it, I'm not going to spoil anything, but for those of you who've read it, there was a certain Asholian character in that story. And I was tempted, and I think some of you will remember from the chat, I was tempted to take that character in a different direction than he went, but it didn't seem like the right story to really do that with. And so I already kind of had in my mind that I wanted to write a character that was darker, and not necessarily a good guy. That was kind of already in my head. And then I kid you not, this happened really differently with Kaz than it has ever happened with um, any book that I can recall. I was literally like, I think I was watching a reel, like scrolling through Facebook or something, something like that. And it was this lightning bolt. Like it wasn't even relevant. I think something happened in the video that I was watching that just sparked a question in my head, because that's usually how these things start. And all of the sudden, and I'm not joking, it was lightning bolt. I knew his name, I knew what he looked like, I knew what his issues were, I knew what his background was. Like it just boom, it was just this huge, like fully fleshed character. And the first scene that you see in the book, which is him with his toys, that was literally what I was seeing. And but it was more than just sort of this, scene. I was understanding where it came from and why he was there and why he did that, and why they were involved and all of that. Like it was just very full, this picture that I got of him. I'm gonna have to I'm getting old. I have to put my glasses on. Um, and the other thing that came in that initial kind of jolt of inspiration was that the woman's name was Jessie. The woman who he was going to meet and marry was named Jessie. And I did not like Jessie for a female character name. Um, and it just did not seem like a romantic lead name to me. And I actually didn't make the connection when that first happened that it was a biblical name. Um, because what happens for me, I can't write a character until I have a name for him. I know that sounds weird, but until I kind of know who they are, I can't write in the story. And because I had this big sort of flash of inspiration about Kaz, and I started to write that scene, but then of course the next scene she needed to be in it. And I'm writing Jesse, and I'm like, it just doesn't sound like a romantic lead. So I'm fighting it. But the other thing that happens, at least for me, I think it does for a lot of authors, sometimes when a name comes or something, you can't change it. You want to, but it just doesn't work. And so at first I was trying to change her name. I found a couple different options. One was, I think it was called Gassine or something like that. Um, and the other was my sister-in-law's niece is named Yesenia, but they call her Jessie for short. So I was like, oh, maybe I could name her after Yesenia. But it wouldn't gel while I was writing. Um, so I went, because normally the way I choose names is by looking up meanings that are either meaningful either to the genre or to the character, and then I pick one that fits the character that I'm writing. So I just went and looked at what Jesse meant, and it said God exists, and I went, okay, Lord, I'm listening. Um, and so and so there we went. But yeah, that's not normally how my stories come together. It's normally I start with a conflict or a like a hook, some sort of what if this was happening? Like it normally starts kind of with the plot, and then I build the characters that are needed to make that plot feasible and plausible. But this was the other way around. It was literally like, here's this guy, here's what he's like, here's why he's like that, and here's where we need to get him to. So, how are we going to do that? Like, that was how it came. So, I started with him in this book, and it was meant to be Mariella. Um, auto caption printed cows. Yes, this is going to be a fun day. Um, okay. The next question was, you said this book was hard to write. Do you regret going into dark romance? So, not even a little bit. That's the truth. I'm not going to say that this was not hard to write. It was hard to write. I've said that from the first day. I chickened out on Kaz twice. I got that flash of inspiration, started writing him. It was either late July or early August last year. I knew he would draw people, but I also knew his story was going to go in directions that were not normal for me. And I was apprehensive about how my particular audience was going to feel about that. Um, but here's just a reality that I've said for a long time. A, I've always written dark stuff, and I've dialed it back for serialization. I've dialed it back for publishing in general, not to not go places, but just to bring as many people along as possible. Um, but the reality is, God doesn't shy away from the ugly things in life, and I don't want to either, because I think as long as we're trying to sort of pretend they don't happen, or we're trying to um, not face that or not talk about it, it becomes something that you can't deal with. I think that's what God means when He says, let the light come into the darkness." I think it's about not 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 refusing to see what's really there, or not taking, not trying to hide things to pretend they aren't there. Um, so anyway, it was actually for me a very comfortable place to be in a dark setting and in a dark character. When I have written for fun, I always end up there. But I had had a real season of fear in 2022. Any of you who were around for that will remember it was in the lead up to Guardian, actually, when he was still called Reluctant Alpha Daddy. One of my best title efforts, I think. Um, and it was rough. Financially, things were going downhill. My success on web novel was petering out, and I was struggling to find a new sort of home, so to speak. It was pre MFR, so I hadn't sort of found my place there, and there was just a lot going on. There was a lot going on in my personal life. There was a lot going on professionally, and I was working really hard to try and fit in this lane that the editors were telling me I needed to fit into. And I wasn't ever going to fit it perfectly, but I was kind of trying to walk with one foot in what they wanted and one foot in what I wanted. And I was coming out of that. I was getting to the point where I was realizing I need to just do what I do and trust that God's going to bring the people to come along. But I was vacillating on that. And then, if you remember last year, all that little shocker around Teacher's Pet, the story that hardly anyone has read because it went really quick. Because it looked like it was going to be great, and then it wasn't great, and all of that kind of came in just right when I started writing Kaz, and so he got put aside for that, which was sort of August to November, I think. And then I don't think Kristen's here. Is Kristen here? Has anybody seen her? Late last year, when I knew I was about to finish writing Heart of Fire. I needed a new story, and of course, Kaz was right there because he was what I had been writing before I got that other contract. Um, and I went back to Kristen, who had read the original chapters that I'd written, and she was like, "You need to not do that," like, because I was like, everybody's gonna, um, but yeah, so I just decided to go all in because I knew I could only do one book, and just because of what was going on with our family and stuff, I needed more time. And yeah, so do I regret going into dark romance? Not at all. Um, but it's not to say it's easy. As you know, I didn't think I was going to do another dark one right away because it is draining. And yet here we are with Hunt for You about to start. So apparently I have no control over what inspiration comes, but yeah, no, I love it. With that said, where? Oh, okay. So I don't think Kristen's here. This is the one prize today that I'm giving just purely as just because I can't tell you guys honestly how Kristen held my hand at the beginning of this story and actually through the whole thing, um, to sort of keep me like she has some very colorful ways of expressing balls to the wall. That's the phrase I'm going to use. Uh, Free balling in the Lord's light is how Kristen puts it, which I love. But she would literally be like, nope, nope, every time I'd start going, oh, I'm not sure. What about this? And she'd be like, up, up, up. So, as a thank you to Kristen, um, I am going to give her. Oh, sorry, that was probably really loud for you guys. This is a set of proofs. So these are not, here we go. These are not the published version. These are the version that was first developed um, for the whole series. And I'm going to send those to Kristen as a thank you for her help and support, and for not letting me pussy out on this book. Because trust me, it was looking like happening for a little while there. Um, that's not the only prize for today, but I wanted you. I wasn't sure if Kristen was going to make it or not. Okay. Um, oh, yeah. So one of the other questions was, is this story exactly the way you imagined it when you first started writing? The characters are, and where they end up is exactly where I knew they needed to go. Like that was always the end game, was for Kaz to have his epiphany and his shift and his change in priorities. And I knew going in that it was going to take something very dark and very not fun for him to get there. So in like the conceptual way, yes, the book is exactly what is the journey, I guess, is exactly what I always planned. But the overall plot, in terms of the small sort of conflicts and the way things came together and the character interactions, stuff like that, everything went in directions I didn't expect. When I first wrote Rake, he was intended to be a genuine love triangle. As in he and so the original way that it was plotted. Do you guys want to hear stuff like that? It's just occurred to me. I hope this won't ruin the story for you. Um, the way it was originally plotted was that she and Rake would never actually, nothing inappropriate would ever happen in between them, but they would acknowledge feelings for each other and make a plan to escape Kaz, because of the things that you saw him do, at the end of volume two, I think it was. So that was always the original plan, was that he was going, basically, originally, Rick was going to be her best friend slash the guy I would have gotten together with if I'd met him before I met Kaz. And Rake was going to acknowledge his feelings for her to her, but not ever do anything about it. And then Kaz was going to betray her, and in the wake of that, Rake would say, I'm not letting you go through this anymore. We're getting out of here. They would make a plan to escape together. And when their, meeting up occurred, Rake was going to realize she was pregnant. And she was going to refuse to leave on that basis. So that was how it was originally going to play out. That was my original plotting. Um, and Rake was going to respect that. Like, one Rake's role in this book was always, always to be a man of integrity and a man who was going to be like the contrast for Kaz's, sort of feral. Um, Selfishness is the wrong word, but it is selfish in the end. The way Kaz lived his life up to a point. Um, yes, she would have, Tara. Like the way that I had planned it originally was that she would grieve that Kaz, or she would think Kaz could never be what he was supposed to be, and he was actually going to cheat, like fully cheat. And in the wake of that, she would be like, "That's it, I'm done." And then she would find out she was pregnant. That would force them back together. But in that, Kaz's journey was always going to be the same. He would betray, and in the wake of that, recognize what he'd done, what he had destroyed, because he would lose it, and he would know that he lost it because the bond is affected by that. And so he would then turn and become and sort of help her to heal over time. So the betrayal was going to happen earlier. It would have happened at the end of the first volume, and then the second volume would have been, or second or third, somewhere in there, would have been him, uh, like, I don't want to say earning her back because I don't think that's the way it works, but him being the one to have shifted. So they started out where he was the fearful, traumatized, combative one, and she was the one sort of smoothing things over and making it work for them. And then when he did that, it was those roles were going to flip. And he was going to be the one who went, okay, now I have to carry the burden of her now being traumatized and broken, and I did that. So he was going to sort of throw his own stuff aside and be there for her, and over the course of having a baby and all of the stuff that would happen there, they would reunite, and then happy days and war, and then everybody's happy. um Tara said, I think the way you wrote it had us more able to forgive Kaz. Yeah. And and it wasn't, I didn't make the decision to go that way with that in mind, but once it started coming together and I realized Rake was never going to, there were two things that were wrong with that original plotting. One was that um, Jesse would never actually leave Kaz. Not unless, well, okay, yes, she would if he, if he did that, she would. I don't know how to explain it, but the scene that was written where you see Jesse recognize that he's in the process of betraying her, about to betray her, and deciding that she has to be there anyway, that was really crucial for her character. And I realized I couldn't work that in with the plot that I had started with. But at the same time as that, the more I wrote Rake, the more obvious it became that he was never going to put himself in a position to steal her away, so to speak. He would have his offers to get her out were real, but they weren't about him, they were about her. So I'm not saying he never would have helped a woman get away from Kaz. I'm saying he wouldn't steal her away for himself. And then on top of that, it meant, if the things had gone that way, that the first person to learn that Jessie was pregnant was Rake, and that felt really off to me. I really wanted Kaz to be the one. So yeah, there was a lot of reasons why it went, but honestly, the primary reason it went the way it did was because the more I wrote Rake, the more I knew he just wouldn't do that. Like, he would want to, he would battle with it, but he would never go through with that. So I actually like the way it turned out better. But I'm I think that those stories are real. I know people who've lived through them where somebody has ultimately betrayed their spouse, and their relationship has come back from it. But it takes so much time and so much effort and so much commitment from both people, not just one. Um, I think it would have been very hard to write in a meaningful way. And so I think the way this happened actually worked better for the point of the story, which was to see the redemption of a person who started, completely saturated in trauma and self-loathing and selfishness, and became somebody who was loving sacrificially. Um, to that end, do you ever get inspired or change the plot based on reader comments? Not really, but sort of. So first of all, I get this question almost every book, and there's two reasons. Usually, by the time you're reading something on the apps, I'm already like weeks ahead of writing in the story. And that usually means, 30 chapters. Like I'm well ahead in the story. Um, so oftentimes when readers are coming and going, "Ooh, what about this?" or "This should happen," or whatever, I've usually already written the resolution to whatever the conflict is that's in the publication right now. So it's usually too late to go back and change it. You'll all have seen at different times people say stuff, and I'm like, man, I wish I'd thought of that because there's some really good stuff that comes up. Um, but what I often get more, I would say, and this happens, I think, in every book, there's certain things, there's foreshadowing, or there's certain things that come up with the characters, usually pretty early on in the book, or themes that are going through. And I'll see a lot of very strong responses. Well, I hope it doesn't go this way, or I hope it doesn't go that way, or whatever. And what that does is give me clarity about, because often I've got two or three options for how I'm going to resolve something, long term in the story. A good example for those of you who were here for the choice, um, there was all this talk fairly early on about she better not be having a dream. This better not be her at the end and it's all been a dream. And that had been an option to me, and I had toyed with it, and I wasn't committed to it, and I had already kind of decided otherwise. But when I saw how, like, up in arms people got about the idea of that, I was like, okay, so we are not doing any dream stuff in this story. So that's actually more often what happens is that you guys give me a gauge for what is going to be beneficial to the story and what's not. But with that said, there are times when y'all are like, you better not be doing this, and we're going there. So if you've been with me for a couple years, you know, you know what story I'm talking about. um, because sometimes the thing that you don't want to happen was the entire point of the story. So, yeah, that's just unfortunate. But there are also times, there have been, so what has also happened several times is that people have suggested things that I already planned to write. And that's really frustrating when that happens because I'm like, I wanted to surprise you. Um, so Tara said, "You better not kill off Maya." Yeah, we're gonna get to that stuff in a little while. Lots of questions about that. Um, uh, Kendra, yeah, there were several people with the. You know what? We'll talk about that later because we are gonna get into the. No, the Kaz stuff. I don't think I actually had any questions about the actual Kaz thing. So I'll say this. There are several readers who had to take a break when Kaz, breached the bond or began to breach the bond. And I don't blame you. And I want to reiterate any of my books. Like we do go to dark places sometimes. And I never want, the whole point of bringing those things into a story is for them to be healing or enlightening, not for them to be destructive. So, if you're ever in a place personally where you just can't go there in a healthy way, you don't have to apologize to me. I had lots, not lots. I had a couple people be like, "I'm really sorry, but I can't." I'm never going to get upset if it's not a good place for you to be. Like not every book is for every reader, and if you're in a spot where it's not healthy to be in that kind of environment, then by all means, I would hate to be the reason somebody is, having real life struggles. Like when I was writing King of Beasts, for those of you who were here for that one, there were several people in the comments when we were getting to the end of King of Beasts, and again when we were getting to the end of Queen. There were several people in the comments. Like I had one woman telling me she had to medicate before she came in to read that day's chapters, and she wasn't meaning like just for that day. She was like every day. I have to take my anxiety meds before I read, and I'm like, that's not good. Like that's not why we're here. Please don't do that. Please don't read the story. Like, if you have to chemically change your brain in order to be here, don't be here. I am 100% behind staying healthy. Um, so I'm not, you're never going to hear me criticize people for taking a step back or taking a break, which is what's happened a lot with this book. There's been a lot of people, particularly on Radish, where it got very popular, who stopped for a while and then came back when it had gotten further into the story and they felt like they could, kind of move through it and not be living in it. Which, great if that works for you. Absolutely. I always knew Kaz was going to do this stuff, and I always knew it was going to be hard to read. Um, And that was why I was anxious about it at the beginning, because I knew in order for him to have the kind of epiphany he had to break his life up. He had to explode everything, and he had to hurt Jesse really badly. So, yeah, that was rough. And it's I shouldn't say it's not funny. You guys know I get the I get the author giggles or the evil laugh about people being surprised by plot twists and stuff like that. So I have a really mixed um, reaction when I see, like, even now the book continues to be promoted on Radish, get a lot of new people coming through. Every month I'll get a batch of new readers, and they're always in the first in the first volume, just like besotted with him and can't wait to see him fall in love, and she's going to show him and all this stuff. And on the one hand, I love that they are falling for him and they want to be there. On the other hand, it's like, because what they're expecting is that he falls for her deeply, throws aside all of his, bad hang-ups, and then they go and fight the war together. And so, of course, they get to the end of volume two, and a lot of them are like, wait, 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 because it's not going where they thought it was going. Um, so, I mean, there's a part of me that's like, yes, because I'm not being predictable. But then there's another part of me that's like, like, apply some brakes early on because I don't want people to be like emotionally wounded. But yeah, that stuff happens. Anna says, I knew Maya was off. Sure, sure you did. Actually, that's true. She has been sus of Maya right from the beginning. But in fairness, Anna, you are sus of everybody. For goodness sake, you even were sus of Jesse at one point. So I'm sorry, I don't believe a blanket sus, can be validated post villain reveal. I don't know how else to say that. Um, wait, I'm gonna try and catch up on some comments here. Somebody said they would have been out of their ever-loving mind about something, but um I can't see the comment, darn it. Sorry, I don't know what you would have. I'm assuming you would have been out of your ever-loving mind if it was the original plot that I talked to you about. We are way past emotionally wounded. Um, so here's the truth. I get contacts from different readers. Sometimes it's you guys who are always around. Sometimes it's like randoms that I don't know. Talking about how the story has affected their real life. With King of Beasts, it was wonderful because people were coming in to tell me that, it changed their marriage or changed how they viewed their husband or whatever. There was a lot of really positive reinforcement. With this one, it's been interesting because it's been a lot of talk of forgiveness. and a lot of talk about unconditional love, and it's people wrestling with that. So the contacts that I've had, and they're not as numerous, but is from people who are like wanting this to be true and wanting it to be real, but it's not in their real life, or at least not yet. And so it's that push and pull of how far do you go, how much do you give to wait and see if somebody's going to come through for you, kind of thing. Um, yeah, it's just really interesting to me. But that's to me, like that's the goal, right? That's the actual goal of all of these stories, is to get people thinking and feeling and considering real life stuff. Because to me, fiction is a great way to present um, real conflicts and real emotional journeys, but like in a non-confrontational, like you don't have to be defensive against it, because it's all it is you're watching somebody process something. It's not like you have to process this. So I'm always really flattered and really gratified when somebody does take it the next step and go, I've felt that way in my real life, and here's now what I'm thinking about as a result of this story. I love that stuff. That's like my favorite thing that happens um, with fiction. Um, okay. This is going. I don't know if Kirsty's still here, but she asked this one. When planning Kaz and showing his need for control, how did you land on bondage? What process did that look like for you, and were there other ideas you discarded? Also, what is a pommel horse? Okay, so first of all, as I said at the beginning, Kaz came fully fleshed. So this is, again, this is not normal. If you'd asked me that same question about a different character, the answer would not be the same. But with Kaz, he arrived in my mind already populated, so to speak. Like I knew about his control issues, I knew where they came from, and I knew what effect that would have on him and how he related to people and how it affected his sexual appetite and how he dealt with females. So no, there wasn't any other considerations, at least in this particular case. But I also knew that there had to be, like, he's not a sadist. He's never been somebody who gets joy out of hurting somebody, like physically hurting them. He's never been that. What brings him into this arena when he's young is that his it's actually his own fear. So what I saw was a man who, when he was young and learning relationships and learning women, um, it's very vulnerable to be naked and expressing and um, asking for things you want and all of that kind of thing. So this was before he was compelling people. So for him, the the bondage was a way to very organically create safety for himself. Like in the first instance, it was just a practical solution to a problem that he had, which was that he couldn't feel abandoned or released or whatever while he had this sort of shrinking fear that this person might be about to, betray him physically, like try to assassinate him or something. And that was a fear that he had regardless of whether it was feasible for his partner to do that to him. It was a vulnerable state to be in, and he did not like being vulnerable. So this initially began as a practical solution to that, and became an appetite for him, became something that he grew to understand better and enjoy in and of itself. um, so he was never like, I always had to warn people. They're like, it's the BDSM for me. I'm like, this is not BDSM. There's no sadism here. He does not like to physically cause pain. He doesn't want to make people bleed. Like, there's nothing like that. It's purely about control for him. And then that just developed into this sort of fuller picture as he came to understand the process better and what it could do between two people and all of that kind of stuff. It was a way he could control without compelling as well. Um, so there wasn't any other ideas discarded. It was something that I could just see he needed. Like that was just part of his life. Um, the Palm Wars. Okay, so um, the reason I'm pausing. There's a secondary question that comes along with these, and I think I'll answer the Palm Wars thing in that one. The secondary question was, you said you don't like to Google stuff because of what it brings up in your feed. How did you research this part of this story for Kaz? I've had more than one woman give me the eyebrow and be like, "So, is this what you're into?" No. Um, I could definitely, I mean, there's aspects of this that I could see why it's attractive to people. And I absolutely, if my husband came to me one day with a silk whatever, and be like, "Hey, let's give it a shot," I'd be like, "Cool." But no, it's not a part of my life. But it is something that I can understand how it appeals to people and why. Um, I think it can be in a healthy way and it can be in a really unhealthy way. So it depends how you're using it. But for me, it's true. I don't like to Google stuff at all because that does bring things, and this is not an arena that I am like looking to explore. Although I will tell you that I'm still trying to talk my husband into a sex couch. Because I thought those were really cool, and I'm getting old, um, which can have an effect on things that you can and can't do with old bodies and old joints, and those things look like they're awesome. Anyway, um, I wouldn't Google it. What I did was I have very wonderful friends who do have experiences with different things or who have read a lot. And so I can go to them and be like, what happens with this? Or what does this mean? Or how would you, or why would you, like I would just have conversations with people. What do you know about this kind of thing? I had a couple of different people share links with me to things that were just foundational exploratory things. And then to be really honest with you, I use my imagination a lot. What would I enjoy? Well, if I was in that situation, and my goal was to connect but take control, or to push someone's boundaries, because that's what bondage is used for a lot. It's to the dominant submissive thing. A lot of that is to do with one person essentially putting themselves in the other's hands to push boundaries, to uh, find a way through it together. So a good Dom will understand the person who has given themselves and will know where their boundaries are and will understand when and how to push those. It's not just a force thing. It's in a good and healthy situation, from what I gather. A lot of what is happening is the building of trust and the building of stability between the two, so that the submissive person gets drawn in and is safe to now explore things that they weren't willing to explore before. Um, Mary, she said she's still trying to convince hubby to get a sex shop. Yes. And honestly, his only resistance to that is because he thinks people will know what it is. And I said, "Well, you didn't know what it was when I sent you the picture." He's like, "Yeah." But then I went to one of my colleagues and I said, "Have you ever seen one of these?" And he's like, "Yeah, my sister's got one. Apparently they're really cool." So, um, yeah. Anyway, I talked to people and I used my imagination. When and how, so like, no, I haven't done bondage, but at the same time, I've developed trust and intimacy, and I understand pushing boundaries, or I understand taking explorations together. What do so I'm like taking that and extrapolating from it. What would put a person in a position to feel a certain way, and then how would we explore that together? I didn't actually get to write Kaz doing much of that stuff, um, which is unfortunate because I was looking forward to sort of like exploring that, but it just never, the story was never in the right place. That's more something that would have happened post story where he was actually intentionally, molding situations for her and having conversations with her ahead of time and sort of, because in my mind, this is something that continues to be a part of their life, and they both enjoy it. Um, And as you saw, at times, even though it's not really her thing, at times they would switch because that was how he would grow himself. he would offer himself to, because it makes him vulnerable, and he's willing to be vulnerable with her. Um, so no, I didn't Google. I did use a lot of my imagination. I also have, as you know, I'm very open with people about stuff, and people will talk to me about things like throughout my life. People will talk to me about things. I've heard stories. I knew enough. I knew enough to like understand the basics. And I had been in some groups too where people would talk about these things from a real life perspective. And I was able to like contact them privately and be like, "Hey, do you have any sort of offerings of what?" And so people would send me. I've seen, the red, yellow, green light structure, and like I've seen the ways that different people kind of manage the agreements that they make or the contracts that they have and stuff like that. So I understand at least in concept how these things work. But yeah, the pommel horse specifically. So um, I don't know. I'll be really honest with you. I don't know. I'm sure it exists as a bondage piece of furniture. I'm sure that it exists. But a real actual pommel horse is something that I used to use when I was horse riding. And you would have seen them, or at least that's what we used to call them in New Zealand. I don't know if that's what they call them here, but it's a flat board across two A-frames, right? And builders use them a lot to lay like wood across when they're going to do stuff and things like that. And it's designed for stability. And in working with horses, we would use them to put saddles on. But they are the perfect shape for if you were going to have someone laying on something and bind their wrists and their ankles. It would put them in a literally unable to move position. They would be flat from hip to shoulder, but then their arms and legs would be down and could be bound. And I just thought, seems like something Kaz would use. So, assuming that he put it, had furniture made so that it was comfortable to be in that position, not just, a plank of wood across a couple A-frames, but that was what I meant when I said pommel horse. And the reason I don't know if it exists in real life is because I don't want to Google this stuff, but I cannot imagine that somebody else has not come up with that. Like, anyway, pommel horse and gymnastics, workhorse and oh, there you go. Yeah, that's right, gymnastics. Yes, 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 that's yes. Okay, that was the other place that it came from in my childhood. Don't they use them in men's gymnastics? Yeah, but they're a big solid thing, I think. They're not, but again, it would still work if you had things sort of at the four corners or whatever. Um, so, Christy, that's what a pommel horse is. Um, and that's what I imagined it would be used for. But of course, with leather and padding and, padded cuffs and, just, the nice stuff. Um, was there any backlash with fans? Yes and no, not really. Um, I was nervous about this one because when I wrote Hunted by My Alpha, in which Rig is just a playboy, like he's not even a bad guy, but he's promiscuous and a flirt and, man whore at the beginning. And I had readers contact me directly and be like, I can't believe you're writing this junk and I'm never going to read that. And, you know, mm. And he was not a bad guy at all. And all he did in the first scene was kiss her, like in the dark. That's all he did. And so I thought, man, if people reacted that way to that, I can't imagine what they're gonna do with this. Um, but no, I think the people that were genuinely unhappy about it just kind of left and didn't talk to me about it. And then I think there was a lot of people, I know there was people who said, I wouldn't normally go into this, but I'm going to go because I trust you. And they did, and they ended up sticking around. So, oh, Kristen's here. Kristen, did you see that you won a prize? You won a prize. So no, there wasn't any real backlash. There was some losses. Um, but the other thing was I gained a lot of new fans. Part of that's because I got on Radish, which I haven't been on before, so I found some new readers that way, but also on Amazon. But yeah, Kaz has sold better than any of my books for like 2 years. I think the last book that I had that earned as much as this was um, Rise of the Dark Alpha. And that one technically earned less because it was only on one site. Kaz was slower to build, but now he earns more or in that realm on two different sites. And I hope that he's still going to keep growing. That's the beauty of being on Amazon now is that it's not like the platforms where it just stops getting any promotion the minute it's finished. We'll see, but Kaz is selling well for me, so we'll see. Oh, so when we started, I have another giveaway, but I need to. Which one is it? It is when we came into the chat today, and I said to you, I can't remember whether it was in this one or the first one because I messed up. If you weren't here at the beginning, I had technical difficulties. Anyway, Janelle was the first person to comment in the chat, which means she gets these if she wants them because they are kind of, you know, saucy. Um, don't worry, there's more to come. And oh, how'd your live go, Amy? It was great. I spent a lot of time wrestling plastic and dropping things and drinking my coffee and making noises that nobody wanted to hear. Super professional. Okay, so I've been talking too long. We're gonna get into the backstory questions. You're welcome, Janelle. Um, I'm gonna try and go a little bit faster through these. Sorry. How did Jesse's family become evil? Was it an event, and was her mother evil too? So, I used to work for the New Zealand police when I lived there. One of my favorite jobs I've ever had, but also one of the most challenging. No, I was not a police officer. I worked in support of managers who were heads of departments for what they called special teams. I think they call, I can't remember what the exact word was, but basically guys who did things like the detectives who did, homicide and stuff like that, the special ops who did like the helicopters and the raids and all that sort of stuff, the dog squad, the who else did we have? There was like I don't know 5 or 6 different sort of specialist departments within the New Zealand police because New Zealand only have federal police. They do not have any other form of law enforcement at that level. I mean, they have their equivalents of diplomatic and FBI and that kind of thing, but for the policing of citizenry, they only have federal police, and so we were broken up by regions. And the guys that I worked with did the Lower North Island, which is where the capital is. So it was very central. It was very big. I got to work with and learn from people, men mostly, who had been cops for 20 or 30 years and were now, facing retirement and had been running these groups. And what I observed, because at the same time that that was happening, was I had friends whose husbands or wives became police officers, starting down, going into what they call the police college and becoming qualified and then becoming police. And I got to see like the two ends of a police career at the same time. And there was one point where I went to one of the guys who worked in the diplomatic protection um, because I was worried about something that was going on with my friend's husband, something that I had observed, changes in his behavior and stuff since he had become a police officer. And this man who'd been in policing for 20 years, I think at that point, said to me, the reality is when you give people power, most people come into policing pretty ideological, where they have this idea that they're going to come in and be the hero and save people from the bad guy and this kind of thing. And in reality, the vast majority of what policing is dealing with the bad guy. watching people lie and deceive and destroy and steal and all this kind of stuff. And he said, that in order to deal with that, a person has to be A, empowered, and B, they have to trust the people that they work with. Um, you can't walk into a home where bad things are happening without being sure that the people that are with you are going to help you deal with it. And what he talked about was how that can affect people's minds. And some people, it makes them go dark, is the reality. He said in some cases, when people are both empowered and isolated by that, right? Because you get to see things and deal with things that nobody else gets to see and deal with. And this was something that I observed in the cops that I knew who'd been cops for decades. They were very jaded, um, very, well, they were good men. The ones that I worked with were good men, but they were always assuming they were sus patrol. They were absolutely sus patrol. Everywhere they went, everything they saw, they assumed the worst. So if they're about what they call tip out a car, so that means that somebody's weaving in the lane or whatever, they've got reason to believe there's a problem here, and they pull the car over. They're trained and have experienced so that they acknowledge that the most dangerous situations that they walk into on a day-to-day basis as a cop is the ones where you didn't plan it and you don't know. So like the special ops guys would say, we have this, they do the, the black and the helicopters and all that crazy stuff. And they're like, but we know what we're going into. We know when. We've got this whole team. We've done surveillance. We've got the whole thing ahead of time. He's like, the guy that's tipping out a car on the highway, zero clue. Doesn't know who it is, didn't know where they come from, didn't know what they've got. He's like, that's actually way more dangerous because you have to walk in prepared for the worst and hoping it just isn't. Which, of course, most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's just a routine thing and everybody's on their way and it's not a problem. But this is why you see, policing in America is very different. So I'm not even going to, but policing in New Zealand, we used to have teams come from other countries, literally from other countries, to come and observe our system and our cops and whatever. It's not perfect. There were definitely problems, but it was different, very different to what you see here. And those guys showed me and let me see and would talk to me about the fact that when you empower people and you put them constantly in the path of criminals, some of them go bad. That's just a reality. They either decide that they're above the law because they are the ones who are enforcing it, or they get so kind of jaded and cynical about what's going on that they're like, well, pfft, what's the point? We can't win. Might as well join them, kind of thing. Um, and plus, they get access to information and things that other people don't have. So if they do have a decision to go bad, they can do it more effectively because they know things that normal people don't know. They know stuff that's going on. They know places and solutions and whatever. Access to resources that normal people don't have. So information is power. And I always imagined that what had happened in Jessie's family was that her father, who was already an abusive coward, um, became a hotshot, police officer and was ambitious and saw that his power could extend even beyond that. And so it became twisted for him. And so instead of, becoming a drug dealer or whatever, he started finding the corruption underneath all of those annals of power and exploiting them. And I don't just believe. I know that that scenario is real. I know that the people exist who live that way, and that often what you see in circles of power is people who present to be one way and are very, very different behind the scenes. And I guess I just wanted to kind of depict that. Um, so was her family always evil? I mean, you could say so in terms of her dad being abusive. That preceded being a cop. Um, but the mom was a domestic abuse victim, and the sons were molded by a man. This is how he views the world, right? So there wasn't really any choice in terms of her siblings. Like they had to either completely um, what do you say, reject their family, or they had to go with it, and they all went with it. How did he find out about the wolves? So my imagining of her dad was that he started as a normal cop who was just sort of corrupted by what was going on, and moved up in the circles, the corrupt circles, and was introduced to that information. In the world, the way I set it up, they're like an urban legend, so everybody knows of them, but only some people believe they're real. And of the ones who believe they're real, only an even smaller amount know that they're actually physically present in the city. So it depends who you're talking to. Some people, even normal people, some people know that the wolves exist, but they're always this kind of shadowy, mysterious thing. And it depends on who you're talking to, whether they are real or just something, like a boogeyman type of thing. But the people in the circles of corruption absolutely know about them and have interacted with them and traded and all of that sort of stuff. So he learned that way. Um, and what happened to Jesse's mom? Jesse's mom, I thought I covered it in the book, but I got that question a couple of times. Jesse's mom got sick and she died. So Jesse was left in a home with all men, and all men who were messed up. And she was molded by her mother in the sense that her mother was the gentler, the peacemaker, the giver in that home when Jesse was very young. And then she got sick and died. And so Jesse had already had that example. But Jessie is actually also molded by her dad, and she's stronger than her mother was. And so the thing that she describes when she was about 14, I think, where she finally sort of accepted that her dad was never going to love her the way she needed or wanted him to, that was a real turning point for her because her options there, or she was already alone, like her mom was already gone, so her options at that point were either to go bad, to go dark, and try to kind of beat her dad at his own game, or to be different. And she chose to be different. She chose to follow God and plan her escape. But she comes from, I want to say, poverty. It was poverty for her. Her father was never without resources. Their home was a lower middle class home, in part because he was selfish and the resources he had were spent on himself, and in part because he never had a lot. He was always striving for that, right? So a lot of his stuff went into whatever he needed to try to climb that ladder. And the boys were in on it too, but everybody's very selfish. So because she's not out there doing this stuff, she doesn't get the extra resources or the stolen goods or anything like the others did. So she has to do it the hard way and go get a job and save money and try to get out of the house, which is what she was in the process of doing when the boys sold her off. Um, Sorry, I'm just looking at the questions because I had to figure out where I was. The other thing I would say about that is that it is very isolating to live in abuse. And people were like, why didn't her mom take her? Or what? There was no other extended family that would help or stuff like this. When you have a toxic person who's like top of the food chain, so first her dad sort of poisons her mom, isolates her from her family, convinces her that they're all bad news or whatever it was that he chose to pick on. He gets her away from other people that would help her. So make sure that those relationships are strained or estranged so that she doesn't, she's reliant on him. So first that happens in their relationship. Then you pass this on to the kids, right? And so yes, she did have extended family, but they weren't close. And I always imagine, because I've seen it happen, her mother, who is abused and living in fear, but also just messed up, right? Because she's in a bad situation, um, to an extent, has to adopt these positions about other people to make what she's going through okay, right? If my husband is wrong about what he's saying about my sister, for example, then I'm the one who's got the problem. So I've seen a lot of people who are in abusive families adopt that same sort of mentality towards other people, that they're toxic, or that, kind of believe the manipulator, right? And be on board with what the manipulator is saying. Well, then when it's mom who's thinking that way, she's then passing that on, right? So Jesse's never had a really healthy support system around her. Rake's really the first person that she's ever interacted with lengthily. So she had a church and she had people that cared, but quite often people in that sort of situation, they kind of keep themselves distant. And unless the other people are strong and confident to break in and be like, hey, I think something's going on in your life, it all just kind of continues to happen. And that was what she'd been in. She had people in her life that cared about her, but they weren't intimate, they weren't close. She had never trusted others to let them know what was going on, and no one had sort of walked in and said, I understand that something's going on, let me help you. So there was this, constant. So Rake was the first person who ever just like, boom, here we are. This is what we're doing. This is what you're dealing with. He's very straight talker, which was why that resonated for her, because he took the what if out of everything. He was just like, this is what you're dealing with. Boom. These are your choices. Boom. I'll help you. There was never this sort of tiptoeing around stuff. Um, oh, how did Kaz and Rake meet, and do they remain friends? Yes, they will, and hopefully you saw that in if you've read. Oh, little plug if you haven't. Rake has a novella. It's called Loving the Wolf Cleric, and it's on Amazon only. You can read it as its own little novella, or you can read it as part of the series bundle on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you don't need to buy it. You can just get the series bundle and go to the end. Um, Kaz and Rake have a really. I was sad that not everybody trusted their relationship, and I get that they were in like everything that happens at the beginning of this book leaves them in constant conflict, right? And it's Rake's job to challenge. Kaz put him in that position, and that gets relayed early on in the story that that's what he's there to do. But I understand that that's a statement as opposed to watching these two men sort of like butt heads constantly. But to both of them, it was very normal and natural that Rake was constantly like kind of poking him, because that was what they do. That was why Kaz had him there. It was kind of like, keep me humble, keep me thinking. Don't let me do what my father did, which is just become this tyrant, and everybody around him is a yes man, and then he starts going insane, effectively, believing his own, marketing or whatever. Um, so Kaz and Rake grew up in the packs together. They're roughly the same age. They knew of each other or were around in the same circles, at least, just age wise, from very, very young. And Rake, back in his younger days, in his adolescent days, was not a, quote unquote good guy. He's always had a healthier balance than Kaz, and he's always been, he was never a destructive force, but he was a player, and he was a hedonist, I guess. He was a guy who went out to get what he wanted and find it and good to go. Um, so they had a relationship, or like the people that you went to high school with, and you know them and they know you, and if you both ended up at the same place at the same time, it'd be fine to sit there and talk and whatever, but they're not like intimate friends. They were like that when they were younger, because Kaz always was like, he's royal, he's the heir, or at least one of them. You know what I mean? Like there was a separation because Rake did not come from people high in the rankings. Um, but around the same time was Kaz. Uh, they became closer friends and got to know each other better as teens, late teens, and then of course Kaz starts getting into the actual conflicts with his siblings and his dad. And my dog is at my office window. Obviously, somebody's put him out. He puts his paws up on the window and he like, anyway, I apologize if you can hear that, because he can hear me. He's trying to get me to let him back in. Um, Rake and Kaz became friends, like actual friends, in their late teens, which was around the same time that Kaz was having all of the issues with his siblings, and his whole support network was falling apart. Um, to him, up until that point, it had always kind of been a game trying to outwit or outmatch his brothers and stuff like this. And so when it all became very real, and he was betrayed, and then he killed his brother, and then his dad, applauded that, like that whole sort of spiral that he went through at that stage of his life. Rake was the one that wasn't either afraid of him or judging him. So everybody else, as Kaz would see it, it's not necessarily true, but as Kaz would have seen it at that age, everybody else was either afraid of him, which was most people, because of the power that he had and where his position was. Most people would step softly around him, right? It's hard to have somebody be a confidant or a support when they seem to be afraid of you. And then secondarily, even if they weren't afraid of him, they were part of the system that was the problem. And Rake was kind of the only one who was separate to that. He hadn't sort of, his life had not transformed yet. He was still just a guy. But he wasn't judging. And just because of the kind of guy he is, he didn't have as much like idolization, I guess, of Kaz's position. So he could be more of just a friend. So through those years when things were going really bad, Rake was kind of this very steadying presence in his life, which is why when he finally did take his dad out, he brought Rake on, because by this time Rake's become a Christian. He's vowed celibacy. He's a stand-up guy. And he knows Kaz's whole past. And what he didn't know, Kaz kind of filled him in on. Um, so yeah, they grew close over time. And by the time you meet them, what are they? I think Rake's 29 and Kaz is 30. I can't remember if I had Rake a year older or a year younger, but they're around 30. And, there's no. I would love. One of the things that I haven't had an opportunity to do that I would love to do is let you see how they interact when there's no conflict and neither of them is in crisis, because they are very brotherly in their way of dealing with each other. So it is ribbing and teasing, like you saw, especially at the beginning. I think you got to see Kaz kind of, always trying to put the boot in, and people thought he was being mean. That was just like Rake would do the same. But because of what was going on, Rake was in the, this is not a time for laughs kind of mentality, or one or the other of them would be in crisis, and that's not the time to be teasing somebody. So you didn't get to see so much of that dynamic in the story, and I wish that you could, because I love the two of them together. Like think Gar and Aaron, kind of, if you're around in the anima books, kind of that mutual respect, but also can I get one up on you kind of thing. It's sort of like that, but darker. Anyway, um, so yes, to me, in post story, they become brothers in truth, in the sense that they nobody else gets what they've been through, and their mates are close, and the whole thing. So yeah, I love the two of them together. And I love that Kaz had him in that position even when Kaz did not have faith. He didn't put Rake in that position because he trusted Rake's God. He put Rake in that position because he trusted Rake. And he knew that Rake would, at the very least, tell him the truth, which was why it was so hard for him when he sensed Rake's feelings for Jesse, because it appeared to be once again a betrayal where he had finally allowed himself to be vulnerable with a person and trust them and sort of give them, some intimacy and some vulnerability in his life. And it appeared to him that Rake had dishonored that and was just one more person in his life who would say they were one thing and turn out to be another, which was why he reacted so strongly. Um, so I guess it's kind of my fault that you didn't really understand how close they were before all of that happened. Um, okay. Got a couple just catch up questions that are just short. And these are for sort of as we're getting through the end. What happened to Cain? Cain is just a disruptor. He's not evil, he's not a villain, but he's not on Kaz's side, so to speak. He's just somebody who does what he thinks he has to do, and sometimes that's good for Kaz and sometimes it's not. The one that was interesting to me, lots of people wanted to know what happened to Tori. Tori, if you don't remember, was the female wolf. She gets introduced very early on when Kaz and Jesse are in their first sort of separation. He's avoiding her or they're having some issues. And Tori's the one who was in the hallway and kind of propositions him a little bit, and he denies her. But she makes it obvious that if he were to change his mind, she'd make herself available to him. She's the same one who gets very forward with him in the den, and eventually the female that he sort of betrays Jesse with. And everyone seemed to assume that she was this villain with this like plot, this, intention to destroy the queen and take her position and all that kind of thing. And I never imagined her that way. Tori is the woman that I have met at every age and stage of my life. She's the woman who has deep-seated insecurities and sees any attention from a guy, a desirable guy, as an asset, and feels somehow superior if a guy will cheat with her. Like she feels that makes her feel like she got one over. I don't know how they it validates her in some way. And Kaz is an attractive, powerful guy. He had lots of opportunities, but I kind of needed to have a character who epitomized that because I couldn't have, five different females coming up to him every volume. It would just get too confusing. So I just used the same one to sort of demonstrate how this would work. And so to me, Tori she wasn't a vehicle for anything. She didn't have any great plot. She just, you know, she'll see what happens if he's willing. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, in her mind, he's attractive and powerful and rich, and why wouldn't you tap that if you could? And maybe something good comes out of it. She is not a girl's girl. She is definitely somebody who, um, relationships are a a tool, I guess, or a vehicle. I don't know. I don't know. So Tori was just a female who was still in the catacombs when the whole thing went down, and she's not a good woman. She's also not a villain. She's not somebody who was working with the humans or anything like that. She was just a manipulative woman who wanted Kaz and would have taken him if she could get him. She also didn't deserve the way that Kaz dealt with her because even though she looks very forward with him, like in the story because of what's going on, she looks like the instigator. And I mean, in one sense, she is. He didn't, like, when they had that interaction in the hallway and at the den and stuff, it wasn't like he came to her and was like, come here. So she is an instigator in that sense. But imagine that up to that point in his life, he's been open to pretty much anything, anytime. So he's been picky about sexual partners only from the standpoint of he wants his own power, right? He gets more power by getting submission from a human than he does from a female wolf. So he has pursued relationships with female wolves. That's not to say he has not been promiscuous, sorry, with humans. That's not to say he hasn't been promiscuous with female wolves. He has his whole life. So for her to approach him in the hallway that way, it looked like she was instigating, but in reality, she was interacting with him in a way that he has interacted with females his whole life. There was nothing about what she was doing that was, out of the frame for the way that he lived up to that point. It was Jesse that made the difference for him. So he set boundaries with Jesse that he'd never set before. So Tori was meant to be kind of this example of this is how he's always lived. And this is how he's now changing what he's always done. The toys were also the same. There was a lot of people that thought I was going to bring the toys back as like these villains of, they were completely, they'd been stripped back in terms of their minds and stuff. It wasn't that they couldn't function independently, they could, but he had removed their to them the point of their existence really was his pleasure, and they gained pleasure from it too. So they were just like petulant children to lose him. I imagined that they were destroyed by losing him because he had effectively set them up to please him, and when he then leaves, they're left. They've got nothing because he's been their whole point of existence up to that point. Anyway, I apologize if I gave the impression that Tori was going to be some big, player in the game. She was not. Um, the other just a yes or no question, did Rake and Risa have kids? Yes. But that's all I'm going to say for now. Yes, they did. Tori was part of his old life before Jesse. Yes. Um, and Mariella said she wanted power. I don't complete. Oh, it's gone. She wanted power. I don't completely blame her, but she was at fault as well. She was an instrument to help Kaz realize his mistake. Yes. So, as in terms of a story vehicle, she's the catalyst for him. She opens up an opportunity that he should not take. And that's how he comes to wrestle with that whole situation. So she played a very important role in the story, but she herself was not a big player. She was just a example. She was his old life, and he had to choose whether he was going to stay in that old life or make a new one. So I have another giveaway. Oh, and I would like to hear from you all. Particularly, I don't know how many of the Sus Patrol are actually in the chat right now. If you're not familiar and if you're not in the private chat, so every book that I do on the Pay by Chapter, we have a private direct message chat. It's a group, and everybody can get in and discuss the story together every day, and they're a lot of fun. That chat effectively started with what we call the Sus Patrol, which is people who have been reading my books usually for at least a couple years, where and we've had a lot of twists and a lot of turns, and they have gotten to the point where, like the police I used to work for, all they can see is the bad stuff. So, yes, Sus Patrol, sound off. So these are my dear, wonderful friends who literally look sideways at every single character I write now, and make it really, really hard for me to come up with plot twists that they have not already anticipated, and often before we've even gotten to that part of the story. However, what I would like to know from you, Sus Patrol, is anyone that you saw, and they don't have to be in this live, um, who did you see become Sus Patrol in this book? Like, who do you think moved out of, normal readership into everybody is sus? Or at least, getting maybe baby sus? I don't know. Can you give me some names? Because I'd like to give a couple prizes away, and I don't know if my measure is the same as yours. So if you have any ideas, please put them in the comments. Because yeah, who leveled up? There you go. Oh, Bookie, you're right. I don't know if I know that. You know what? Oh, she was on MFR. I can't remember. I know she's been in the Facebook group at some point, but I don't know if she stayed. I'd need to find her. But that's a good idea, Bobby. Technically, Bobby is new to Sus Patrol also. Just like to say. Is there anybody? I'm not suspicious enough to be Sus Patrol. This is true. I love talking to Mary because she not never, but rarely anticipates where I'm going with a story. So I get to have lots of surprises for her, which is nice. I'll see if I can hunt Bookie down. Yeah, I thought Bobby was one too. Bobby? Hey, Bobby, is it Sakogun or Sakugan? Everybody has these names that I don't know how to pronounce because I only ever see them written down. Bobby, if you're not aware, was Sakugan on MFR and on Web Novel. But Bobby and I only met, was it last year? I think it was last year. Even that fact makes me sus. The Sus Patrol, oh, I'm going to show you. I have them here. I have two or three of these. So if we can find baby sus or sussers who have leveled up in this book, I have a couple of the original design. This is the Sus Patrol 2024. I actually started this in 22 or 23. I can't remember, but this was the original design. And then I also have a couple. Oh, where's my other one? Oh, I thought I had it here. Yeah, like this. This is the new and improved Sus Patrol design. Anyway, um, I have a couple of yeah. Nikki is OG. Sorry. Um, I think we've got all the OG here and none of the newbies. Anyway, um, if y'all think of somebody later this evening, message me. But I've got Bookie from MFR and I've got Bobby. Okay, the second most asked question when I put in, I cannot tell you how many times I was asked this question in a variety of ways, but it's the second most asked one was, did you always know Maya was the villain and why did you make her like us? Why did you make us like her so much? Um, so originally when I wrote Maya, very originally in terms of setting up her character, like her archetype, she was set up to be a potential villain. She was set up as the type of character who had that, she had all the right bones. Let's put it that way. Um, and so it was in the back of my mind, right? That she might, that she could be my trigger puller at the end. But then I kind of shifted my focus to Jesse's dad. Um, but he was never, I knew pretty early on, basically once he got compelled, he couldn't really be the villain anymore. There was just too many restrictions on him. Even though there are ways to get around it and stuff, it just he wasn't going to work. He was too he wasn't strong enough after that. Your villain needs to be strong. They need to be someone that it's hard to overcome. And so then I was back to Maya. But she is literally my favorite character in this story. I mean, aside obviously from our primary three, in terms of side character, she is my favorite one. I love her. And I loved writing her. So I did not want her to be the villain, but I had set her up to be the villain. Um, and what ended up happening when I got into, so I had written up to, so it must be the end of volume three, wherever it was that Jessie got taken by her dad. I believe that's the end of volume three. I'd written up to there and I was plotting out to the end, like in detail, because I had my milestones. I knew these, important scenes that needed to happen, but I needed all my ducks in a row. I tried two different ways to plot this story with someone else as a villain, and they did not have the punch. I could make it the governor, I could make it her dad. Who was the other one? But the only characters that would be gut punch villains, betrayers, were Rake and Maya. And there was no way I was making Rake go bad. Just absolutely no way, under any circumstances, that I was making Rake go bad. And in reality, I was really scared everybody was going to guess. Because if you go back when Kaz realizes that when he um, compelled the whole, like when Jesse had her big, release of power that she'd been holding back, and he used it and compelled the entire catacombs, got all the wolves. When they realize that they've got a betrayer on their hands, one of the things that he kind of narrates or observes is that whoever is the betrayer has to have been able to get around his compulsion or manage other people so they do. And and I thought, if anybody if anybody thinks that through on any kind of deep level, you're going to end on Maya because she's the only one that actually has the power to compel, other than Jesse and Kaz. Um, and I thought, if anybody thinks about that, they're going to realize that the only person powerful enough to do that is her, which was why I had him not sit on that thought. We did not explore that thought in his narration. I was waiting, literally waiting for everybody to go, it's got to be Maya. But what was hilarious was that what everybody did was, well, what about Maya? No, it couldn't be Maya. And moved on. And I was just like, yes. Um, I will admit there was some joy for me as an author in that she had become so beloved and so sort of integral to the story that everybody just assumed that the Kaz was right to trust her. Um, yeah, Bobby, and that was the experience. So Bobby said I suspected Maya, but dismissed her because I didn't want it to be her. And that was, I mean, I can't tell you, that was exactly the reaction that I wanted everybody to have. I wanted people to think about her and just be like, nope, couldn't be. So it was a huge, have you not read it, Trey? Oh dear. It was a huge, it was really mixed because on the one hand I felt very gratified that people were overlooking her. And on the other hand, I was like, I felt bad about upsetting everybody. Oh man, Trey! Gah, we have a spoiler in the crew. Um, yeah, I did warn you guys at the beginning. I don't know if Trey was here for that actually. Okay. So yeah, so I only had two options left. Rake was the only other person who had any kind of power at all, and his was not strong enough. But also, I just didn't want to do that to his character because I love him too much. So she was really, in the end, like I say, I tried two other ways to bring the story to a close, and they just lacked punch. They just lacked any kind of emotional payoff. So it had to be her. And plus, I needed somebody who could get around Kaz, and that's really, really hard to do. So really, there was no other choice, which was why I set her up that way in the beginning. But one person did say, why was she so bitter that she would betray them the way she did? And was it a traumatic thing or was she just evil? So one thing I think I wasn't really able to get through because you never got to talk to Maya. Once she was revealing what she was doing, we never got to talk to her in a sort of calm space, right? It all happened really fast. Maya was not evil like Kaz's dad was evil. She was not dark and sadistic. She didn't get off on hurting people or anything like that. What she did get off on was being the smartest person in the room or being the only one who knew everything. So for her, it was, once again, it's a bloodline thing. All comes down to power, right? Power over other people. Maya likes being the person who is not up front and not seen as the leader, but who secretly behind the scenes knows everything that's going on and is manipulating people and making things happen. She's a puppet master. So when she uses that for good, so to speak, which is what she had been doing in Kaz's life, she saw in Kaz somebody that she thought was going to do a good job of leading the wolves. And as long as that was happening, she was happy to just manipulate her way through and do what she wanted to do because Kaz wasn't going to interfere. He trusted her. Um, she had, she had proven herself, so to speak. And it was real. Like she wasn't sitting there the whole time like this. The interactions that you see her have with Jesse and Kaz were very real. But she was omitting this, sort of back of the mind kind of motivation, which was A, she is getting very old, and even the wolf healing, won't work eventually. On top of which she's the strongest and best healer. She can't really heal. She can't heal herself. So she didn't have the same resources accessible to her that, for instance, Kaz did because she could heal Kaz. Um, Kaz didn't really understand how his gift worked in that way. This is how she would do stuff, right? She made herself indispensable by using her gift to heal people and A, having people think that that was all she could do, but also being the best at it, the oldest, the most experienced. Kaz, when he was young, she was already an older woman, and she already had all her ducks in a row. She has far more experience than he does, and also knowledge of history. She's on her third or fourth generation now. So she set herself up to be in a position where nobody wanted her to be gone, right? Um, and in that, she then gets entree into all of the secret stuff. She's in the council. She's a trusted advisor. Kaz talks to her about things he won't talk to other people about because she's family, but she doesn't want the throne. Like, there's a lot of ways that she just set herself up to be trusted, and that gave her a lot of freedom. Um, but I mean, you're talking about a woman who was brought up and molded in an extremely toxic pack structure. She's survived, literally survived two or three kings already by manipulation and making herself indispensable. So she's maneuvered her way through this for her brother and then her nephew, and now with Kaz. With Kaz, she saw somebody that it looked like was going to do pretty good by the pack and not be so toxic. She grew up in toxicity. It's not that she enjoys that. So she's like, let him be, see what he does. Um, so when she said to him, because he said, so it was all fake, and she's like, no, it wasn't. She was being honest. It wasn't fake. She was helping him. But all of those things that she did, they all had an ulterior motive or a side thing, right? So, for example, with Jesse, when Kaz is been shot and is on death's door, and she says to Cassie, you've got to do this. She says to Jesse, excuse me, you've got to do this. Jesse did not have to do it. There's no way that Jesse had a better chance than Maya of getting through that safely. There was some truth to the fact that Maya was getting weak, and it was a very intricate thing that needed to be done. But the reality was, she's sitting there going, she's got two options, right? She sets the queen up either to look like a complete hero and trust her more, or to fail utterly and give her more power. There's no losing. So what she do? She thinks Jesse's going to fail. She doesn't think Jesse can do it, and that's why she pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. Because if they lost Jesse that way, her power goes to Kaz, and if Maya ever takes Kaz out, she gets the power, right? So there's no losing. But obviously the chance was there that she would manage to do it, and in that case, the person who's got the power now trusts Maya more than anybody else. So she was just always working like that, right? Always having sort of a back room or a backdoor plan. Um, and a risk taker with other people. So she's not a risk taker for her own safety, but things like having Jesse do that to Kaz, the risk was huge for for either of them, right? So she's just power hungry, but also older. She didn't want the throne. So it was this really, I can see it all in my head how she thinks. She liked Jesse but didn't respect her. She respected Kaz but didn't like the choices he was making. And as his attachment to Jesse grew stronger and stronger, there's an element of jealousy as well. Because Maya, back in her day, had someone that would have been that for her. And she made the choice back then not to give in to that and to pursue power instead. She did a lot of that out of fear. She was pushed and hurt herself. I have sympathy for her in that situation. But what I've observed about people is when they make decisions that actually destroy themselves, very often, unless they're making a complete turnaround, they want to hold on to their justification for why they did it and make it okay. And to my mind, what Maya did was it was the right thing to do, it was the right choice. And even when she did observe that her life was lesser for it, she still justified it in her mind. There was never any turning away from it. She tells Kaz at one point, I made that choice and it was the wrong choice. She recognizes remorse, I guess, or regret, but she didn't change what she was doing. And to me, that's a huge sign of a manipulator, right? There's a lot of people who feel bad when they're caught, and they genuinely feel bad. Or they feel bad when something bad happens as a consequence of their decision, and they genuinely feel bad. But they don't change the decisions they're making. They continue on that path. And to me, that shows that that person doesn't actually think that what they did was a problem. They just think it just didn't work out that time. Or they're so committed to what they're doing, it was worth paying that price for. And that's what Maya was like. She regretted she lost, and it hurt her that she lost, and she could see what Kaz was gaining. But there's an element of jealousy there because he's getting something she never got. And then he's getting stronger for it. And that made her nervous. Because if the two of them really got it together and really started working together, she might lose what she had. On top of which, like I said, she's getting older. She's not going to live forever. They're not immortal. And the human medicine gave her some opportunities that way because her body is stronger. She was exaggerating her physical weakness leading up to that. Like Kaz said, he thought the reason that she had pulled away and wasn't coming to the council meetings and wasn't healing people and stuff like that was because she was dying. And had she not been my villain, we would have lost her at the end of this story, and it would have been this big grief. Um, and you would have seen how it works when a wolf knows they're dying. There's a whole process that happens in the way that the wolves acknowledge that. And I was going to do all of that. It was going to be a cultural thing for them. Um, so that's what Kaz thought was happening. He thought she was retreating in preparation for her death. He thought that she had given so much to them in that process of saving him that that she was dying, and he was grateful, but he was treating it as a wolf would treat it, which was that you respect what's going on and you leave them to it. And he didn't want to tell Jessie because he didn't want her freaking out when there was nothing she could do to change it. So he was mad when he realized that Maya had used that, right? Manipulated them both. Or manipulated him to where he wasn't raising any flags about what was going on because she knew that that's what he would think was happening. Um, I'd rather her be a villain than die the lovable person you thought she was. Well, I'm glad that that's true for you because That's how it happened. I actually was sad I didn't get to show you that side of the wolves because I thought it was really beautiful how they handle that whole side of life. But it just didn't work for the story. So, anyway. Um, oh, I have another giveaway. We're almost done. Where is it? Here it is. I would. Oh, wait. Wait a second. Okay, everybody. Okay, in the comments if you want to. Mm. So this is a small. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is a big notebook. This is a small one, but they look kind of the same because of the perspective of the camera. If you want to win these, tell me if it was real life and you had to marry one of either Rake or Kaz, which one would you marry? Put it in the comments. Wow, that's a way more mixed bag than I thought it would be. Oh, we got a lot of Rake lovers here. That surprises me. First one to answer, not surprisingly, is Jasmine. Jasmine, you get the notebooks. And what's really funny is I have a little space here to write down who won, and instead of writing Jazz, I wrote Kaz, which I suppose is also quite relevant. Okay, we're almost at the end. The number one question that I got asked for this live, um, and literally almost every person that asked me a question asked this, was did Kaz ever talk to Jessie about trying to compel her body to heal? And if so, did it work? Did they ever have more children? And that was phrased in a variety of ways. Some people were like, did Maya really make her barren, or was it just a thing, or didn't it? But everybody wanted to know what had happened to them in terms of their family and Jesse's body and all of that. Um, so the short answer is yes, they did have the conversation, and yes, Kaz did heal her the best he could, but they never had any more children. Um, and that was secretly a blessing because it avoided the issue of the ranking between siblings, which was always going to be a point of contention between the two of them. But also, Abigail is a tornado, and they were going to need all their energy to deal with her. That little prayer at the end that Jesse has, like that's for real. Their daughter is a firecracker. And she is going to be very, very, there's just always something going on around that girl. So, from I guess, an overarching life perspective, they were going to need all of their resources to deal with her. But I have to tell you, that's like the character, like that's the story answer. The writer answer for me, why I chose to go in that direction, because I know a lot of people were like, "Why would you let Maya do that to her?" So there's two reasons that we went there with Maya. The first is, um, I don't believe that a story is truly satisfying and that a victory really feels like a victory unless it costs something. And I don't mean to be petty about it. I don't mean we have to kill people off every time. I just mean like the point of real triumph is real battle first. So for Maya to just go out and not take anything with her after everything she's done, and how smart and powerful she is, just made no sense to me. She had to hurt something. And that really meant Jesse, Kaz, or Abigail. Those were the three options for in order for the story to have impact. She had to hurt something or someone. But secondarily, for me personally, because loss of a child is part of my life, loss of a pregnancy, um, I struggle, not struggle, I don't like that very often the perfect ending is painted as they get together and have a baby. Kids are hard. And yes, they add a lot to a relationship, but they also can create a lot of problems. So I don't feel like it's a realistic picture, first of all. But secondarily, even though, like, I love my son and I love that we have our son and I love that we have a family and I actually like on a emotional level agree that that's the ideal. It was the ideal that I wanted, but I wasn't able to have more kids after my son. And like I say, and I also lost a pregnancy before him. I know a lot of women that really struggle, that they read these beautiful stories, these wonderful love stories, and then at the end, it ends in a way that isn't a possibility for them. And I just felt like I don't do it every time, but I always kind of have a heart to just put something else in there because I think that there's a place for it. I think there's so many stories where it's this perfect tied up little ending and this perfect tied up little family. And I've written those too. I mean, you guys know I've got plenty of stories where they have more than one kid and there's no issues with fertility or whatever. Um, but yeah, that's why to me it was a combination of the story needing there to be some kind of impact. And then secondarily, that's a particular issue that is close to my heart. So I wanted it, in this case, it fit. It fit really well because the other option was to have Milo take Abigail from them, and I didn't want to do that. Um, so that's why. I know that that wasn't what everybody wanted to see or hear, um, but let's just say that even though they may not have any more, um, you know, children of their own loins, so to speak, they are not without having that role in people's lives. Abigail does not grow up in isolation. Um, but like I say, she needs a lot of time and attention. So, one more giveaway. The big one. Let me get this out. Sorry for the noise. Um, I have a set. This looks like it's not a full set, and that's because the paperbacks for Volume 4 are now available, but literally it's arriving tomorrow. Amazon told me it was going to arrive Thursday and then it got moved, and so now my volume 4 is not arriving until tomorrow. So, this will not, the fourth volume in this set will not be this one. It won't be a proof, it will be the actual published version. I have a full paperback set that I'm going to, and I just want to show you this because I love this. I'm going to actually start doing this with all of them, but I only got the, can you see that? Oops. So every book in the four eventually, I can't remember if I'd gotten these. I think these were, no, yeah. If you look in the series bundle, if you're on Kindle Unlimited, um, pull up the series bundle. At the beginning of each volume, there's a picture, and eventually all of the paperbacks and Kindles will have that picture as the chapter header every time. The only one I've managed to do it with so far, like I say, is the fourth volume. But it's I don't know, I just like it. It's just a nice extra touch. So I have a full set of the paperbacks, USA only, I'm afraid, because these are stinking expensive to send. What I would like you guys to do is tell me in the comments, do you think, now that you've read the whole story, do you think Kaz is a hero who was dark or darkened by his life, or do you think he's a villain who became a hero? Tell me your thoughts. That'll be your entry in the comments. Hang on, I'm just going to put these away while you do that. Man, I am noisy today. Anti-Helen villain into hero. Hero. Hero Darkened and redeemed. Ooh, nice, Rachel. Okay. Okay. Villain who became a hero. I'm with you, Nora, just so you know. But actually, I can't tell. I don't know if it's just because I want him to be. But, okay, I'm going to do the randomness here where I don't look and I just stop on one. Who do I stop on? Tara. Tara, are you in the States? Thank you, Destiny. Bye. Tara, I need to know if you're in America because I have a feeling that you're not. Oh, cool. She is. Tara wins. Yay for you. So, that is all of my questions. Does anybody have any questions that I have not answered that you'd like to put in the comments now? And just bear with me because it takes a few seconds for my stuff to come up. For me, sorry, for the comments to come up for me after you guys send them. Is there an Abigail story coming? Possibly. Tell you what, Abigail is very real and alive in my mind. And I definitely see where her story would go. But I also really needed a break from this world. But I also really love this world. So possibly, that's what I'll say. If the book continues to grow on Amazon and gets a stronger following, then I would say yes. If not, maybe a little novella for fun sometime. I don't know. But I'm not, it's not a no. Thank you, Caroline. Um, why are you so Trey? This is being sweet. Now you're just trying to butter me up, and it's working. I'm awesome because you're awesome. We're all awesome together. Um, another novella, possibly. I'm just saying, like, I see her story, and there's definitely book potential there. Like, she could absolutely be a sequel, like, story. She's definitely got plenty of. I mean, imagine Kaz as a girl, right? Like, all the arrogance without the toxicity having sort of destroyed everything, and yet all of the normal insecurities that a young woman has. And you know what I mean? Like, I see a lot of potential there. Um, and also, it would be hilarious to see. I mean, I literally giggle to myself when I imagine Kaz trying to deal with that. Like, on the one hand, absolutely adoring her, and on the other hand, seeing all the worst parts of his own character come out in his child. Like, there's a lot of fodder for humor there. So yes, would I write it about her? Yes, but I also, it's not like I haven't plotted anything or I don't have a plan for it. It's just in my mind that it could happen. Did Jesse get Maya's power? Yes and no. Um, Maya's power technically would go to. I, I got really turned around at the end of this story with who had whose power and how it worked. Technically, Maya's power would go to Kaz if she just died, like if she just, died of old age, for example, because he's the bloodline. Um, Technically, it should go to Jesse because Jesse killed her, and in theory, it's a dominating thing. She's taken over, but Jesse's actual power was given to Kat. Like, there's this whole sort of twisty thing. So I just kind of said to myself, you know what? They both got so much power now, it really doesn't matter. Her power exists. Where did the name Abigail come from? I had an FL in the Beast named Abigail. Did I? I don't remember that one. The name Abigail is the one of the daughters of Jesse in the Bible. So that's where it came from. Can Abigail take the throne being a female, or will she have to fight for it? She can. She doesn't technically have to fight to be heir because she doesn't have any siblings, but any dominant has to be prepared to defend. So, and because she's a girl, she'd be more likely to have a guy go, I'll give it a shot, see if I can take it, which is part of why her life would be a bit chaotic. Um, just seeing Rethenberger. Oh yes. Oh, this. There we go. This. If you have not read Falling in Love with the King of Beasts, that's my blanket, which is Reth, which is the hero of Falling in Love with the King of Beasts, and my favorite male lead I've ever written. When they swap powers at the end, is Jesse now dominant? No, dominance is nothing to do with the power itself. It's a heart state, but at the same time, obviously your heart state gets changed by having a great deal of power. Jesse would never want to be dominant over Kaz. That's just not how she's wired. Um, Kaz as a girl dad, he's gonna. You have no idea. I imagine Kaz um, being confronted with himself. And by that I mean uh, having to face what he put other people through as he watches his daughter do and say things that he would have done and said at the same age. So it would be very personally confronting for him, which is really hard. And Jessie, as you saw, even when she was little, Jessie's had to battle with her right from the beginning. So Power Swap was a nice touch. I'm glad you liked that. That was a last minute thing, and I wasn't sure how that was going to go down. So, new Beast book. Yeah, you never know. Does your husband ever read your love scenes before you publish them? No. In fact, I'm not sure he's read any of my love scenes. We talk about them sometimes, but I'll tell you what is really funny. This is a true story. So, my husband is very proud of my writing, which is really sweet. So he tells people all the time. And when it's people that he trusts, he'll like pull out the apps and like show people. Anyway, at his work, there was a guy that there was a couple that we sat with at one of like the Christmas function. The guy's name is John. He's a total sweetheart. Whenever I go in, John will give me a hug. John's wife was a romance reader, so when Alan told John that I write romance, John went home and said to his wife, who I believe is named Kayla, I'm not sure, said, "Oh yes, it was Kayla. Kayla, you've got to read this. This is Alan's wife." So apparently, I did not know this. Apparently, she went and got on, I think it was MFR. It was one of the platforms anyway. I think it was MFR for Heart of Fire. Regardless, whatever, whichever platform she was on MFR for Slave. And really liked it and saw that it was performing well. And so through John to Alan to me, sent like good wishes that she had seen that the book was succeeding and she was happy for me. So then when I got the paperbacks, so you know, oh, they're not in here. I have a whole box of volume 1 paperbacks that I got for like Christmas giveaways and stuff. And Alan was here with me and he saw my box of them and he pulls one out and he goes, "Oh, can I take this to work for Kayla, will you sign it?" And I was like, "Sure." So I signed a book and he took it to work, gave it to John, said, "This is for Michaela." He goes, couple hours later, he was walking through the office, and they have an office that's like an old bank house thing. So it's like you go down this main hallway, and there's all these rooms off each side, and the rooms have multiple people in them. Well, the room that John was in, he had left the book on his desk. And Alan said he walked past the door and he heard this laughing. And he looked in, he said there was this circle of about 6 or 7 men, all like leaned in like this, while one of them's reading from the book. So I said, "Which scene was it?" He goes, "I don't know, I wasn't listening, but they were having a really good time." And I said, "I bet you it's the first one, and the first one's pretty saucy." And he goes, "Well," he says, "whatever it was, they were having it." So anyway, so I think I don't know. Alan didn't read it, but I think several men at his work have. So anyway, um, Alan doesn't. Alan is not. My husband is not a fiction reader. So when I wrote if you were here for King of Beasts, there's a chapter in the book towards the end that's actually not the story. It's me talking to Reth, me as the author talking to Reth the character about my husband. Or sorry, It's a depiction of me and my husband talking about. Anyway, it's in there. He read that and he was really uncomfortable about it. Um, because he doesn't like being the center of attention and also because he feels like it he feels like whenever I depict him online, you only see the best side of him, which is probably true because he's not always great, you know. We both trust me. There's times in our house you'd be like, um, "Oh, bye Anna. Sorry, I missed that. I didn't see it when you sent it." Um, anyway, not important. I still don't see why Risa chose to not change the future from the selection. Still bugs me. Okay, so I think you're taking her prophecy or the idea of her prophecy as if she has control over what's to come. The way she sees it and the way I see it is only an information and direction from God to her. So, what Risa was told prior to the selection was not what would happen. What she was told was what is to come needs to be. She was basically told, hold the line. Like, don't change anything, don't try to change anything. What is coming needs to be. So she didn't, she understood or had an instinct that that meant it was going to be bad, but she didn't know what the events were or how they were going to come to pass. She just knew that her job was to stick it through. She was not given a heads up of like, you need to do this or this is going to happen or this is going to happen. So unless you change that, her prophecy is not intended to change the future. It's intended to guide. I hope that's clearer. Um, how did Rick and Risa finally become a couple? Tara, you need to go to Amazon and look up Loving the Wolf Cleric. I wish I could share my screen. Oh, maybe I can share my screen with you. I think there's an option to do that. No, I can't find it, and I'm going to end up messing up something if I do. If you go onto Amazon, so the book is called Loving the Wolf Cleric. So you can either find it by going to one of my other books and clicking my author name, and then it'll show you all my books and it's in there. Or you can search it up by itself, but it's not, I mean, it's not a huge release, so I'm not sure how much Amazon will actually, but I think if you got I think if you got the title right, it would come up. I have to say, that novella was rushed. That was pounded out in the last few days before the release, and I wish that I'd had more time with it because I think the delivery on it wasn't great, but I love the story. I love showing Rake in that way. Um, but anyway, that gives you the whole story. You'll see it all there, how it happened and where and why. Is there any other questions from anybody? Because I'm going to have to get off here in a minute. Thank you so much. Oh, you know what? I need to tell you guys while you're here. This book, I said at the beginning and I've said it all the way through, this book was really hard to write. And the main reason, yes, I had some anxiety, and yes, there was always that in the back of my mind, but the actual reason it was hard, or the core reason it was hard, was because I knew how hard the story was going to be to read. Like I knew the type of conflicts and the darkness that was going to be in it. And the fact that you guys stuck it out with me, like I can't tell you, that feels like a gift. That feels like you doing something for me because I wanted to write the story. I want people to read the story, but I understand that it is not always a pleasant story to read. Um, and because I'm, not a perfect, completely always confident person, I'm a strong person. I know that I'm a strong person. I'm not trying to misrepresent myself, but I have insecurities just like everybody else does. And this story had the potential to make people think bad things about me as an author because people do that. They somehow have in their minds that if I can write this about characters or put characters in these situations, then they must be things I want to do or have done. That's not true, by the way, but sometimes it is, but it's just not, it's creativity means you're making stuff up. But anyway, um, Mariella has a question. I just want you to know that I genuinely feel a personal sense of gratitude that you stuck with the story, that you came with me for the ride, because I know it wasn't easy. And I also know that, there's times when that just kind of drags you down instead of giving you an escape. So I hope you know that I actually, like, personally was impacted by you being here. And I'm grateful. I'm genuinely grateful that you did that. Mariella has a question. What was Mariella's question? I need to try and find it. Was Risa compelled by Maya because she moved? Yes, she was, and she was fighting it. But she couldn't get free of the actual compulsion. So she was looking like she was just basically trying to let Jesse know she was still in her right mind, but she couldn't change what she was doing. There was nothing dramatic happening there. It was just a moment of connection, like Risa basically saying, you're not alone. I'm here with you. Um, Rake was in dire need. Yes, he was. Mary, hi. We love you and have faith. We love the story through the hard parts, and that's what means so much to me because the fact that you'll stick with it when it's not easy, like that's friendship. Um, Showing that anyone can change and come to God no matter where they start. Yeah, I mean that was Jerry. That was the whole goal of this story was, to show a true redemption, a heart that legitimately was dark turning to light. Um, Thank you. It's so good to see you, Sravanthi. Sravanthi has been with me since the daily updates of King of Beasts. So what was that? 2021. Sravanthi, I remember the days when you would leave me dozens of paragraph comments on King every day, and I loved it so much because the book was still growing. And this was all still new to me. This whole model was all still new to me. And it was so much fun to go in every day and, like, have conversations with people that were invested in the story. That was 3 years ago. Can you imagine? Man, that's crazy. Anyway, one hell of a ride. Yes, it was. Gosh, you've been here since February? That was when I started Beast. That's mental. Ah, yes, Janelle. I remember Janelle was the one that I had to constantly remind to breathe because there was some issues with inhaling at times. Anyway, I can't sit here forever. I told my husband I'd be 2 hours, and I've already been 2.5. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking out the story. I will announce the winner of the. Uh, oh, I better do the proper marketing thing here. The winner of this hardback and the calendar. This is a desk calendar. I just pulled it out of its thing. Hang on. Get a different. Oh, that's not a good one. Oh, that's also Rake. I can't even. There's so many pictures of Kaz in this, and I'm not finding them. Anyway, I have a desk calendar and a hardback. Everybody who has commented today, that's an entry. I'm just going to do a random scroll, and wherever it lands, that person's going to win. I will announce that in the Facebook group um, either this evening or tomorrow morning, depending how my evening goes tonight. And thank you. I will endeavor not to allow these giveaways to sit around for 2 months before they get sent like the last ones did. We'll see. Pray for me. Thank you. Thank you for sticking with Kaz and Jesse, and thank you for sticking with me. And if you don't know, my new dark contemporary romance, it's called Hunt for You. It is releasing on Amazon on Wednesday, which means it'll probably be available Tuesday night. If you follow me, if you don't already, you need to follow me on Amazon because all of my releases from here on out, at least for the next few months, that's where they're going. So I'm Amy Lynn. That's AIMEE. Lynn is LYNN. If you follow me on there, it should give you notifications when I have new books out if you're not following in the Facebook group. And Hunt for You is a dark contemporary stalker romance. Masked Man. It's going to be some fun. Anyway, that releases Wednesday. And then I have a romantasy coming out in, it's actually now going to be early December because I learned from this book that I did not give myself enough time. So I'm giving the next book a little bit more time. So it'll be, I think it's the first or second week of December it'll come out. So please go follow me on Amazon if you don't already. Pre-order the books if you know you're going to read them, or wait when they come out. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have a subscription, you can read them there. Okay. Love you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.